Hello and welcome to the webinar today. I'm Alexa Tsui, CEO of Forum, and today we're going to be talking about procurement at the speed of need. Today's event is scheduled from 12 to 1 and will be recorded. We will send the slides out afterwards, so don't worry about that. Just a few things to keep today running smoothly. If you experience any technical issues or have any questions during our program, please reach out to Marianne Brown in the chat. She'll be happy to assist you. We really want today's event to be interactive. So if you think of any questions for the speaker at any point, please type them into the Q&A and he will address them at the end of the webinar. I will help moderate that process. Also, if you want to, in the chat, put in your LinkedIn profile, where you're calling in from, and a little bit about yourself. Maybe something fun, like what you like to do in your free time. That way we can start a little side chat as well. For today, the agenda is going to look like this: commercialization and FAR revision impacts, faster acquisition, CSOs, OTAs, oh my, SHIELD and the GD4A. I love these acronyms, so fun. Challenging DoD and DoW acquisition approaches and structure, NEO primes and the changing landscape, and agency MAC IDIQs. And then we're going to go into Q&A. So right now, I'd love to introduce today's speaker. I've known him for probably 15 years. He's incredible. Brian is the founder and managing principal of FedSavvy Strategies, a firm he has guided since its inception in 2012. With a career spanning various roles, including capture, business development, proposal management, a strong focus on market and competitive intelligence, Brian brings a wealth of expertise and to enable prime contract wins, marketing's expansion plans, and he's well known for his proficiency in designing and running over 500 Black Hat reviews and has successfully established corporate functions dictated to market and competitive intelligence. He is my go-to for Black Hat. He's amazing. I'm going to send it over to him. Let's kick it off.
Thank you very much, Lex. I really appreciate this. So let's see how we do here today. So I guess I'm going to go and take over the slideshow and let's get this right. There we go. So we'll find out if I have technical difficulties, despite Alexa's raving endorsement. Hopefully, I didn't just blow it there with the slides. Let's get. We have a lot of ground to cover, folks. So I hope that we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end here. By all means, jump those questions in there. We'll do the best we can. Do a lot of so. I think this has been, I think, the best way to say it's an interesting year. We live in interesting times. Is probably the best way to articulate that. But I want to set the table. And I was thinking through when Lex and I first started talking about this event, how we could characterize things that have happened this year that will absolutely impact next year and beyond. And as I thought through it, probably the best way to start it was selecting a handful of executive orders that I think have really set the tone, especially on government contract or federal contracting specifically. And these are the ones that I think are most germane. I'm sure some of you may agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you're already pointing your finger at the screen and yelling at me angrily what I've forgotten. We only have an hour, so just bear with us here. So we're going to try to cover these things, but I think these were ones that really got my attention, that some I think have been more impactful than others. Some have been somewhat impactful, some have been immensely impactful. Still, this is what we're going to set the table with in terms of with the commercial first EO, which I think you could probably argue has been very impactful. Common sense of federal procurement, driving FAR revision, also very impactful. Consolidating procurement GSA, debatable. And then what's also been fairly recent is the guidance from the Department of War, formerly known as Department of Defense, and how they're going to be doing acquisitions differently going forward. That's been a little bit more recent. The EO was already set up several months ago, but I think we're down to sort of manifest more tangibly in a meaningful way. So let's get into this a little bit more, folks. So commercial first. I don't think it's brand new for focusing on commercial solutions. I think it's not a novel thing, but it is more of a focus. And I think that the focus being, let's get something that's good enough, right? Let's get something that's commercially available right now, that we can buy right now, that is at least close to where we need it to be. It may not be exactly what we want, but for the most part, will it solve the problem? And I think that the implication, and I'm not sure about any of you, but I definitely get involved in a lot of the GSA, FedSim style procurements. And it's interesting to see how GSA has, I think, had some impact. As an example, where they do these, of course, the former FedSim guys, now Assisted Acquisition Services, AS, they do these really large, complex procurements that are, the ones at least I deal with are often in the 9, 10 figure range. But now they're being much more meticulous in, does this pass commerciality? Am I shaping my procurement to emphasize and focus on commercial-based solutions as opposed to everything has to be special? Well, the reality, I think I'll just say my own opinion that I think the government thinks it's very special. In many ways, it's not. These are problems that are in the commercial market that can be solved with commercial solutions to a degree, but to see the more focus on it, I think is very interesting. And why should you care? I mean, one of the things I like to do is I'll use protest decisions as one of many sources of intelligence. And there's always been a focus on here's my commercial solution. And you'll see, I think, some often really badly failed attempts of applying commercial solution to a government problem, in part because the government may think it's a specialist snowflake when it's really not. But often the company, the contractor fails miserably to articulate why this commercial solution is in fact better than a heavily customized, tailored solution for you. It's more scalable. It's more cost effective. The long-term support is there because you're part of a much bigger customer base, but uses common tools that are going to be better supported, that will be better advanced without heavy amounts of R&D and heavy amounts of customization, which creates risk, right? There's a lot of risk here. The more you tinker with something, the more you're likely to screw it up. So I think from a bidder's perspective, if the appetite is really there, and I think the appetite is more there now than it has been, that this is an opportunity that I personally actually really like. So we will see, I think, how much of an impact this will truly be. Will the government regress and have to have a special little snowflake solutions for special little snowflake problems that aren't really special at all? That's debatable, but I think that at least this is a movement in the right direction. Just my own personal opinion, but maybe you've got a different. I'd be curious. Well, drop your comments in chat about what your thoughts are here. So, common sense far rewrite. Common sense. I've always found common sense to be anything but common. And there's a lot going on here. I'm not a contracts guy. I'm not a lawyer. Thank goodness for that. Maybe I should have been a contract lawyer if I was really smart, but we'll see. So, of course, the point is to simplify the FAR, right? The FAR is this massive beast that people often find to be unwieldy, intimidating, et cetera, which I get it. And these are just sort of my own takes about what I think is interesting about the FAR rewrite. Again, I'm sure there's some angry fingers being pointed at me right now. You've missed something, Brian. That's fine. I probably have. And we can talk offline. You can beat me up there and we can debate it, which is fine. I think there's some things here that really get my attention is the softening of language, a lot less shall and must. And really it's getting to, I think the spirit of the FAR was more guidance. Here are the rules you should be following that would help guide you to be on a straight and narrow path, but it's not so hard over. So it gives you more flexibility, which I personally like. Now, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I actually had a contracting warrant many, 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 many years ago. And I always saw the FAR as this is my guide, but I've got a job to do. I'm going to acquire something. I'm going to get that done. And I'm not going to color outside the lines, but I'm going to make some interpretations based on what I need to get the job done. I think that spirit, I think, may be reinvigorated in this. And we'll see the rulemaking is supposed to be done per GSA, has made this public that they're trying to get the rules done by the end of fiscal 2026. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, but we'll see. They're leaning into commercial value, which I think is great. Best value. I think most of us like to have best value versus, LPTA in the form of functioning. When it says best value, more emphasis on commercial units. Again, consistent with the commercial focus EO. I appreciate that consistency. Small business set asides, rule of two was still around. Now, how much it is really used is, I think, the bigger debate, which we'll talk about here in a moment. That's something that definitely got my attention of the rule of two, maybe not being quite so absolute as it has been. Uh, Market research approaches, if you hadn't noticed that, loosen up a bit. There's a lot looser and more room to maneuver for a government contracting officer and their team to make market research and make their judgment call about what's real out there, what's in the market they can utilize, which I think is actually great. Um, and reinforces GWAS, again, nothing new. It's also consistent with the EO. And then one thing that I actually really liked was a bigger push towards phase procurements. I love phase procurements. I'll talk to you about that in a moment here. But these are things that I thought were big takeaways. So, commercial offerings, great. Yeah, we want to make sure we have more commercial offerings because it's kind of silly with the amount of customization that happens. Is it just making things more fragile, more expensive to sustain and maintain? And it's just costing and wasting taxpayer dollars. You could probably debate that. Um, eh, the thing to impact though, this is just it bugs the hell out of me where I see companies will focus on it's a commercial offering, therefore it's awesome. Well, no, you still got to defend why it's viable. You still have to do the features and benefits of why a commercial solution is the right thing to scratch the itch of the program, what they need, which is it's critical. We can't overstate that enough, I think. But the other part I think many of you might be interested in is what's the future of set-asides? That's a great question. I think that there's been a lot of interesting debate I've seen on LinkedIn, which is very thought-provoking. I'd encourage you to check that out. There's some really smart folks on LinkedIn who've been really digging into this topic specifically. Sam Lay, Stephen Coprince, there's a lot of folks on there that I follow to see what they're thinking and inform my opinion. But I think the big takeaway is with less emphasis and less, I guess, a moat around set asides. And I think that moat, maybe the best way to articulate it is in years past, if it's 8A, it's 8A for life. Not so much. If it's something that's going to be a rule of two, it must be a set aside. That's it. Not so much. So, what does that mean? If you're a small business, I hate to break it to you, but I think that means you better buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to be requiring some very real longer term capture and not so much short term thinking. And I don't want to impugn anybody out there. That's never my intention. But I've dealt with a lot of businesses where you can tell that the amount of capture they're doing and the thoughtfulness they're putting into those capture and the investment they want to put into it is frankly laughable at best. And it may be more some in some cases, not all, and not many, I think, it's like a sense of I'm entitled to this. I've seen small businesses say this out loud. I'm entitled. You're entitled to nothing. And I think that the far rewrite is going to make those set asides less of a thing. Not that they won't be, but it's going to require you to compete more heavily. And at least from my business experience with large, middle market, and smalls, the smalls that figure out how to do that better up front and earlier in their lifetime, they thrive. Usually they thrive. The other ones, they go through this kind of this bell curve of growth. I grow and then I plummet. And that's a real shame. I don't root for people to fail, but I think if you're going to expect set asides to be to carry you, this is a rude awakening that people need to be aware of. Not that the set asides won't happen; they still happen, but it's more at the agency's discretion and not mandated. Market research, I think the interesting implication about that being opened up is can you shape a capture better? Can you shape an opportunity better? Do you have more room? And Alexa and I were bantering about this before this, and I think this may factor into is more unsolicited proposals. Will they be more open to that unsolicited proposal? Will the government be more loose in terms of how they do their research, which may help you shape something better up front? Again, better capture up front. But I think that's actually kind of interesting. I like that it does not make it so prescriptive that you can't make some good judgment calls and make some good smart decisions of how you as the agency shape what your procurement is. Focus on GWAX more. I mean, I think that's a long time coming. I'll be the first to admit out publicly that I am not a big fan of all the prolific number of agency multiple board IDIQs out there. I think it's often the Department of Redundancy and just silly. Like, why do I need a vehicle for something I can get from a GWAC or a schedule? You can constrain your competition more. Your bidders, I get that. Maybe you get, in theory, better deals. That's debatable. Uh, but this reinforces that. which I think is a good thing. It's also consistent with the executive order we put out. And I think another part here that I really I've always been a big fan of, I love phased procurements. We've already seen that. This is not new, but I think to focus on that more, to have two or three phased procurements, it's a great way to eliminate, I guess, the quote unquote riffraff or the bidders who, frankly, they shouldn't be there. You're not tall enough to ride this ride. And to get that notice from the government, we do all you have to do is submit a corporate experience or two, maybe your a summary of your understanding of the problem. If it's clear to them that you're not the right guy to do this, and they tell you that, that's a blessing. I would have much rather some say, Brian, go to ride this ride. And I might want an explanation of why that's the case. Um, but if you get that explanation or learn from that, then you can probably be smarter as a capture and bidding professional. And you can be smarter as a business. And also it saves a lot of money. I would much rather learn early that I'm about to blow $250,000 at BMP that I can spend somewhere else. I like this. And frankly, this tips to all of you. When you get that notice from the government that you're not tall enough to ride that ride, you need to listen. And the number of protest decisions I've seen where exactly that happened, where the bidder said, no, I am tall enough to ride this ride. I'm going to get on this ride. It's not a happy ending. You're going to lose. They already told you that it's not you, it's me, but it's definitely you. So take that hint and move on. I think to see that codified in the far right is a beautiful thing. All right, so let's keep on trucking. So OneGov, consolidation, GSA. This is an interesting topic. We're going to talk about this very briefly. I, there's some merit here, perhaps, where in theory the government gets a better deal. They get better access to companies that often go through channels like resellers. There's already been some very big deals. There's a very quick sample of deals up here, then what they're going to be buying, what they're going to be getting from them. I, I'll I have some conflicting things about this, whether it's a good thing or not. In theory, it sounds great. The government goes directly to these large IT technology vendors, get better deals, less redundant contracting, which I get. That might streamline things. But I think to the next point, though, is the reseller model is definitely being turned on its head. Perhaps with some validation there. There are probably a lot of resellers out there, not actually a lot. There could be some that don't add any value at all. It's pure pass through. They just sort of trim out the top. But there are some that actually add real value. They work with that government customer to help them figure out, is this really what you need to buy? I think, even though I may think I'm a smart buyer in a lot of things I buy, but if I get some other expertise to help me make a better decision, I think I'd appreciate that. And then maybe some value. Also, maybe something else, at least makes me think more critically than just rubber stamp things. I think that's where the role of the system integrator, is that going to be eroded a bit? Is this going to have the government think that I know how to buy cloud perfectly? As an example, there are so many pitfalls in that, just one example, where you could improperly resource something. Maybe you buy too much on Amazon or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or whatever the cloud's out there, where someone who really knows how to find that right balance can help you save money and optimize your performance. If you're doing all this directly, are you really smart enough to do it? And this is not knocking our government folks, but I think I would value having someone who's a real true guru in something to help me figure it out. And does this erode that? It might. It might erode it. It might just say, well, I can do it myself and go to Costco and buy all the stuff I need to build my house. Things like the Cloud One deal, unless that was a cancellation that Accenture had, was that the right thing for the Air Force to do? We'll see how that's going to go long term. But this is an important thing that I think the story is yet to be written on this fully. OTAs, right? So I think a lot of people in the industry love OTAs. It's like, oh, it's great to get me things better and faster. I can not have all the red tape of the FAR in my way. I can do things. It's great. And OTAs are great. And of course, originally intended for non-traditionals to engage them on interesting technical challenges, prototypes and technology, and then perhaps move into production, move into sustainment. But of course, a lot of traditionals will also do this. And this can be a beautiful thing. You can see I just pulled some really quick spending samples to give you an idea. I was wondering myself, how much is being spent with OTs in the first place? And no surprise, this is the defense market that is really the primary consumer of OTAs. And it's a little bit of a dip in 2022, but then a fairly significant increase percentage-wise into 2023 and 2024. And even though I think it's worthwhile pointing out, though, that $18 billion to me looks like a lot. If you think about the big picture of defense contract spending, we're talking barely 4 or 5%, not even. This is a speck. Um, but of course, with not only the executive orders that were put out that I referenced early on, but also the more recent DoD/DOW guidance, this is what's going to happen. A more prolific use of OTAs are going to happen. Now, questions you should be thinking about is this good for your business? Because I think I'll just offer kind of a off the slide point here, is that maybe FAR-based contracting seems clumsy and slow and annoying and it's just not what you want to do. Also, don't forget it gives you protections too. That works both ways. It keeps the government honest, it keeps you honest too. So in an OTA, you may not have those protections. You may not have those advantages. You can debate either way. Is it better to go fast and break things and create some other risk? Or is it better to go slow and steady? That's debatable. I think along with this, though, you will expect this will be more of a big deal, especially with big programs. I'll call out Golden Dome specifically. For those of you, we'll talk about that in a bit here. For those 1,014 Shield awardees, you may go, hallelujah, I've got my path now. I'm on my way. We'll see. But something like that, and also even you could argue the brand new air traffic control system, that's a huge award that's got put to Peraton. They'll have a lot of other cascading downstream effects. This is where you'll see an opportunity to make cool things, right? To do things, go move fast and break things in a way where you probably will have less constraints on you as a business to how to operate and how to get things done. And you'll expect this to see these more of these bold initiatives like a Golden Dome, for example. You should expect this will be the MO. So I think to get comfortable with it is going to be critical for businesses, but also what's the impact, right? There's what's going to be the role of consortiums? Consortiums have, in a lot of ways, dominated the OTA market in terms of being a pathway for OTAs to happen, for more government and industry to meet and engage and get OTAs done. If the defense market is moving towards, let's say, more OTA usage, will they become more confident and comfortable doing OTAs themselves? Does that eliminate the need of the consortiums, or at least they reduce the need of the consortiums? So what's that role? And I just at least wonder beyond that, with OTAs, how many contracting professionals really know how to do an OTA properly? I would hazard a guess that the majority of them understand FAR-based contracting really well, mostly well. But OTAs, it's a whole new world. So I think we're going to have a significant upskilling of the workforce, of the acquisition workforce on the government side for this to be meaningful and actually useful. It's great to talk about moving fast and breaking things, but if all you're doing is breaking things, then I think it begins to undermine the speed and agility that's afforded by the OTA. And we will see if government can keep up and scale things up. By the way, if you're a company that does acquisition work, you're not upskilling yourself here, you're probably missing out because there's a few things I'm going to touch about here in a bit that might be a threat to you and your business. All right, so CSOs. CSO, sort of the OTA cousin, I guess that's the way I'll call it. You can hate that description or you can love it. It's up to you. Commercial solutions opening. It's not used as OTAs. I think it's not quite as mainstream as OTAs have become. And OTAs are nothing new. They've been around for decades. CSOs just haven't been used so much. In those, the distinction, if you're not familiar with it, OTAs more for prototyping, prototype development, maybe some sustainment, maybe production. Some services sneak in there too. They shouldn't be, but they sneak in there anyway. CSOs is it can be both, but OTAs are not far. CSO can go either way. Could be far based, could not be far based. It depends on the situation and what makes sense. But I think the CSO, what it is more here's an offering that I'm going to have for you. This is going to be something where I, as a company, can maybe deliver in a way that I've always wanted to commercially, but the contracts that I've been having to deal with just don't allow for that. I think that's a big implication of CSOs. And I haven't seen a lot of CSOs pop up, but there's been some more prominent ones. One of my somewhat timely and actually favorite examples is Flight School Next. I think some of you who are signed on probably are familiar with that. Flight School Next. The short version, if you're not, is if I've got aspiring Army aviators who go to Fort Novosel/Fort Rucker and they learn how to do the basics of flight. If I go there right now, I have this ecosystem of contractors who run the whole place. I've got companies who provide the flight school instructors. I've got businesses who are doing the helicopter maintenance and upkeep and sustainment. I've got those who are helping deliver training. I've got a number of other support contractors that are necessary to enable that flight school to actually work. Well, the whole idea of a CSO in this case is to make a true, no kidding, legitimate COCO model, contractor owned, contractor operated, where the Army says, listen, here's an aspiring Army aviator. I'm going to drop this person off here. I'm going to come back in X number of weeks and pick them up. And in that time, your problem is to teach them how to fly. How you do it, follow my instructions of how flight should be done in a basic way, but the rest is your problem. You're the smart guys, figure it out. The whole idea behind this is to really turn this into an as a service model, which is if you think about our commercial lives, our just day-to-day consumer lives, that's how we buy. Do I sweat Pepco of how to deliver power to my house? I just want them to get it there. How they get it there, that's their problem. I'm paying a bill. I want my power. Do I sweat Verizon? How they get internet to my house? No, I don't. So you get the idea. That's the idea that you might see in CSOs where it's a true, at least it allows a true as a service model. Now, in the spirit of commercial offerings, the FAR rewrite, the executive orders I stated earlier, this may become more of a thing. And I think I think it has some interesting implications. There's also an enormous amount of risk. I mean, whoever wins flight school next, that's going to be a gigantic contract, massive. It's also going to be incredibly expensive and risky, but it could be a good business to have that you can make all that work. Now, on a smaller scale, I think the other implications around this, if let's say you as a business, if you have a service offering, for example, that's very mature, you're very confident what you can do, and you don't want to have the constraint of what's typically a staff aug contract, which is, let's be honest with ourselves here. Let's have a little honest talk here. Most service businesses, you're a staff aug model, whether you like it or not. Maybe you hate doing that business, but that's the only thing you can get. The contract structure makes it staff aug. You have minimal room to kind of choose your own destiny. Like in my own business, I don't do staff aug. If someone comes to me with a problem, okay, I got it. We're going to work on it. What do you need to do? We'll give you some inputs. Let me know what you're thinking. Get some check-ins. That's about it. We're going to figure out how to get the problem solved. That's it. And the same idea here. A true commercial offering was a more as a service offering. I think the challenge for a lot of government customers is embracing their NLSA. Let it go. Let it go. And just actually really let the contractor do their job and be the smart people that you've hired them to be, as opposed to glorified minions. So that's going to be a big culture shift, and this may take a while. The OTA change that we've talked about earlier, I think a little bit more accepted now. It's more normal. It's more mainstream. It's still not mainstream considering the percentage of OTAs versus other contracts. It's still a teeny tiny percent. But this is something that if I'm a services company, maybe I want to push for a CSO. Maybe I want to take advantage of the market research part being more loose and provide unsolicited proposals where, I can do this IT service as a service, true as a service. We maybe use a CSO approach. What do you think, government? But that's going to require some culture change for the government to really just let go and let you do your job. All right, so let's keep on going here. So Shield, right? I had to channel my inner Ron Burgundy here. Kind of a big deal. It is. So I think I couldn't say any better than Ron Burgundy can. So that's what we got here. He already programmed for 25 billion euros in this fiscal year. That's Golden Dome as a whole. And of course, I'm sure as many of you are aware that Shield is out and Shield's already made 1,014 awards. There are still more coming. There were over 2,000 bidders. Just process for a minute. 2,000 bidders. I have never in my career seen that many. I went to the industry day in August in Huntsville. I never expected to see a hockey arena filled for an industry day. So if that doesn't get that through to you, this is kind of a big deal. I give up. I give up, guys. So the IDIQ, $151 billion, 10 years, that's nuts. That's just crazy. I think, but let's think about takeaways, right? There's I'll get a little bit more in the Golden Dome here. And it's a little bit distressing to me that I think a lot of bidders who maybe had some FOMO problem with Shield, that fear of missing out, where I have to get on Shield. I'm not sure what it's going to do, but I can get it gone. Okay, I get that. You see $151 billion ceiling. And if you're really doing research, you realize that there are some cost estimates of Golden Dome as a fully operational program to realize the vision it's been and then charted for would cost maybe upward of 3.6 trillion over its lifetime. That was a really interesting study by the American Enterprise Institute, if you're curious. Very good work. I was very impressed by it. I'm a total nerd, and I nerded out on that in a big way. But bigger picture is, what do you do? Right? What's the point? I mean, what is the niche you think you're gonna be satisfying? What is the technical challenge that you're gonna help solve for Golden Dawn to become a reality? And we already have these capabilities right now. They already exist, but there's a lot more to do. If you're curious, follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content around this. So if you're curious to learn more about it, task orders might start flowing in Q2. Probably. Um, but I challenge you to think about the technical challenges you would try to solve, but also don't just be so myopically focused on an MDA, right? MDA awarded Shield, great. But what about other agencies that are focusing on Golden Dome capabilities? Space Systems Command, Space Development Agency, Space and Missile Defense Command, just to name a couple. You need to think bigger picture. That's my challenge to you as you look at 2026 is, what is your fit? What are you solving? And who is going to have the itch you have to scratch? Oh, by the way, in case you missed this, yes, the criteria to get a Shield award was, can you walk and chew gum? I've never seen an RFP with that low of a barrier to entry in my career. So walk and chew gum, great. You're on Shield. Congratulations. But many of you are going to get kicked out of your parents' basement. So if you don't get on board and submit a compliant proposal when these things start cutting loose in 12 months, you're out. I think that's a good thing. I think that this is way too many awards to manage, and most companies on there, like, what are you going to do? You got no fit. This is a hope and a dream. Maybe I'm missing something there, but probably not. But to get rid of the companies who don't belong on this is a good thing to clean it up a bit. So, but let's get into some example, right? We could have a whole hour or two talking about needs for Golden Dome. This is just a teeny tiny snapshot of some known technical needs that it will take to make Golden Dome a reality against all the different types of threats of hypersonics, advanced cruise missiles, of course, ballistics, and also drone swarms. These are examples of the threats that Golden Dome is supposed to be able to mitigate. So I won't go into this in detail. You have curious, talk to me offline. So as a sample, you get some of the bigger spenders. This is the spending they have on contracts today, right now, this moment, an average annual spend on contracts. So MDA is obviously the big dog, Space Force with SSC and SDA, great, SMDC, a little skewed because the Patriot missile is a big part of the spend, and the Navy, of course, is all about Aegis, which is fantastic, and it's also the best service of all. So I'm former Navy, so I'm a little biased here, but just give you a sense about what we're looking at. Okay, next topic. All right, we keep on trucking. For Alexa gives me the yank and says, "All right, shut up, Brian. You're talking too much time." So this is a little bit fresher right now of the DOW, DOD, et cetera, acquisition landscape changes, consolidating the vaunted PEO structure. For anyone who's played in the defense market, you know that PEOs are kind of a big deal. Managing a program from its entire life cycle, from conception until death. The whole life cycle is yours to manage. So those become big customers, those you want to often engage, depending on what you do. So those POs are going to go away. And instead, we have portfolio acquisition executive looking for capability sets. PEO being more, let's say, platform or program specific, a little bit more narrow of a definition. In some cases, some are pretty broad. Some you could argue are pretty narrow. And some you could probably argue that why are these two PEOs separate? They overlap. It it seems kind of dumb to have them in different silos. So the idea is to merge them and focus on capability development. Now, there's some things in here that I thought were actually interesting, where you'll have contract officers be aligned with a PAE. That person will focus on the PA exclusively. They'll have longer term assignments for better continuity. I think that's actually a good thing. Because the running joke when I was in least in the Navy is, what's the difference between a good commanding officer and a bad commanding officer? About 18 months, which was indicative of the transitory nature of the military, where you're constantly rotating. The longer assignments should provide better continuity, more consistency in decision making, more corporate knowledge in terms of what we've learned as opposed to relearning something every time someone rotates down. That's actually interesting. Also, then the little bit the implied carrot and stick. If you're doing well with keeping programs on track, keeping them on task, there's rewards. If you're not, you may be beaten. So perhaps a bit more teeth to failures. And we've had some very high profile failures. The Navy's recent example is the failure of and the cancellation of the Constellation class frigate, which irritates the hell out of me. It's actually a capability that the Navy needs, but they blew it. Plain and simple, they blew it. So I hope with this restructuring that it might have better focus and better results. I think we'll see less systems, definitely, because the acquisition management process is so awful, so onerous. But the focus on moving fast and breaking things, which we will see how that goes, has some interesting implications for less, I guess, allegiance to legacy acquisition processes. So, kind of a hint for all of you who make your business in legacy acquisition processes and mastering them, you need to rethink a few things about how you do your business because you may become obsolete very, very fast. Speed of acquisition using AI to enable the processing of documents and processing of tasks. Probably not a bad thing. We'll see how it goes. Of course, OTAs, DOW specifically called out. They're going to really examine the involvement and utility of these consortiums. If they think a consortium is not that useful, it may be going away. But does that mean the DOW is going to be taking on more OTAs themselves? Well, they should be. And that may be the pathway. We'll see. Of course, commercial products, that's nothing new. And what's interesting, though, about that is the seemingly dichotomy of things. We want more commercial, but we want IP rights. How that will play out is debatable. If I had a commercial product that was my product, I invested all the R&D into it, I would probably not be so keen to give up any sort of IP rights. If I build something for you, that's a different story. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, a few other things. I think I hit on this some of these already. I want to read slides to you, but will in the emphasis on incentives and disincentives for individual performers have a real meaningful impact on performance? I think we've all seen acquisition programs that have gone horribly, horribly wrong in really spectacular ways that this waste money, they screw up capabilities that we need, etc. Will this focus on individual performance to how they are incentivized to perform better? I don't know, a little bit. AI, I mean, I think people get all worked up about AI being the path for enlightenment for everything. If they can reduce the amount of meaningless tasks and paperwork, I'm all for it. I wonder and worry about how much it will be relied upon, though, in terms of getting things done, analysis, and getting decisions done. We'll see, but that's definitely the focus here. I have to wonder from a BD and capture perspective, if I'm not siloed inside of a PEO, I think from a BD and capture perspective, we've all seen companies who get siloed. Oh, they know PEO aviation, but they can't lateral over here. Well, if I'm part of a bigger organization, perhaps that is more focused on a capability set than being focused on one platform or two or three, do I have the chance to lateral around more? Do I have adjacency moves inside that portfolio? You could probably argue that's the case. I would think if I'm going to be optimistic, that may in fact be the case. That's actually, I think it's a good thing for BD and capture to have more adjacent growth opportunities. And then I mentioned this briefly. I want to hit this part really hard. There's a lot of boutique companies who've mastered the whole acquisition process. And that has had value, I think. I really do believe that they've had value to help our government partners navigate a draconian, clumsy, very intense acquisition process. But if that's your thing and that's being blown up, there's some soul searching that's going to have to happen here. How do you pivot the expertise to foster more commercial acquisition? How do you foster the expertise to understand how to build capabilities better? How do you foster that to know a domain better? That's perhaps an area to pivot. And also then to focus on, let's focus on good enough and not perfect. If I have a spec for a vehicle that I want to go 100 miles an hour, but there's a commercially available one that meets most of my requirement, only goes 90, do I need that extra 10 miles an hour? I might, but do I need it right now? Probably not. Maybe you can budge on that a little bit, but you get something at a fraction of the price for doing something customized. And you work on the capabilities later on. Something. It's the more the commercial mindset. So I think the big takeaway, if you're a contractor in that space, either you get on board or you might find yourself being pushed off to the side. So just a word of the wise. With OTAs having more consortium, the necessity rather to upskill the defense acquisition workforce, certainly. With being more proficient with OTAs, CSOs, you can argue that too. It's going to be really critical. Perhaps there's business opportunity there to help train them on that. The consortiums, more they're going to be less used? Maybe not. I don't know. Um, so I have these other points already. I think that the IP part, though, concerning is that that's always a contentious topic. And I've got a lot of acquisitions I've been a part of where people want IP rights and the government wants IP rights. The companies want to give it up. We'll see how that goes, but this is probably more contentious with the clear direction from DoD, DOW that they want IP rights. They want the property to be theirs as much as possible. Okay, so Neo primes, right? So I had to bring in Neo. I couldn't resist, guys. So if you like the Matrix like I do, hopefully you'll appreciate the little sense of humor here. Let's talk about Neo primes. For the vast majority of people out there, business out there, we've kind of been doing business the same way for generations. If we're honest about it, we're really honest about it, is you give me your specs, you tell me what you need, I'll build it for you. But I'm not going to take risk. Or I'll take very minimal risk. There's a lot of businesses in our space who have a allergic reaction to risk. Not all, but many are very. But the neoprimes, they flip this whole model on its head. Say the hell with that. They take the mindset of a true commercial company. Where you know what? I think there's a market for this. I've done my research. I've done my concept development. I'm going to build it. I'm going to build something. I'm going to go sell it. That's what we're seeing more and more in our space. And I think in mostly defense contracting, but not just that, but also the federal civilian market, where companies will come to a market with a product They may tinker with it a bit, but it kind of is what it is, right? I can only customize it so much before it becomes a sort of weird sort of mutant platform. And seeing that rise, these companies are going to feature very prominently in terms of the newer initiatives like Golden Dome as an example, because they can move faster. And they will move faster because they've already moved fast enough to develop something that's mostly there to what you need. There's some examples here on the board, and Drool, I think, is a perfect example. If you haven't seen the interview with their CEO and founder, Palmer Luckey, on 60 Minutes, watch it. That interview, I think, will help you understand the psychology of the neoprime better than anything I can tell you. It's a great interview, well worthwhile. I enjoyed it. It was interesting and I think eye-opening for me. But they came to market with, I'm going to build autonomous weapons. I'm also going to have a AI product that will allow me to do command and control and make this all work. Lattice. They've been very successful already selling. Palantir. You could probably argue that Palantir is a neoprime, is not a neoprime. I would argue they really are more that follow that model where we have our different platforms, Foundry, Gotham, etc., and we customize it heavily to fit what you need. But we're coming to you with already, here's what we built. We're going to simply adjust it to fit what you need. But really, it's more of a commercial mindset. They do have a thriving commercial business too. SpaceX, I think if you living under a rock for the last 20 years, you don't know what SpaceX is. Revolutionized heavy lift, Starlink, and the same idea. But you'll see others that are more in the middle market that are often private equity backed, or sometimes not, that come to our market with a cool product. It might fail, it might thrive, but the point is they can move fast. And that's the advantage they have. That if you think about all the things we've talked about so far, let's get things done in the commercial way, the neoprimes are going to thrive in that environment. If those of us who are in this market for a while don't make some adjustments, we may find ourselves having our lunch eaten by the neoprimes. So speaking of which, so they learned Kung Fu. Have you learned Kung Fu? So let's talk about Kung Fu a little bit more. It's the good enough mentality that it's not going to be perfect, but it's good enough to fit what you're looking for. And that's what the neoprime is trying to accomplish, and what they have, in many cases, successfully accomplished. The ambitious program, the Golden Dome, brand new air traffic control system are going to be perfect examples of where the neoprime will thrive. Um, it sounds easy in sort of a business case environment, but you may be wondering, well, I don't have big buckets of money. Neither do I. Uh, but and you may not have access to that capital. That's where I think private equity has been doing very well. They've been buying up and building platform companies, which if you look at what they're doing, look very carefully, in many cases, they are creating a product, a thing that's going to be their flagship way to go to market. That's reality. Yes, they can benefit from that private equity capital to invest and then ideally sell to a strategic buyer. Maybe they do an IPO. Maybe they sell to another private equity. Otherwise, they'll find the exit, but they're going to market differently in many ways. And but even if you're not building some cool widget or you don't have any desire to build a cool widget, I think that we can learn from this though, is that CSOs, what about CSOs? CSOs, if you want to embrace that and you design a service delivery approach, like an as a service type of service that you see an opportunity for, maybe that's the way you can take that neo-prime sort of I learned Kung Fu attitude and you can apply that Kung Fu to thrive in an environment that will be fundamentally different going forward. Now, how much that will really stick in terms of change, only time will tell. I think if any of us believe it's permanent, this is the way of the future, that things won't change again, we're probably delusional. But I think there's nothing to make me believe that it won't change in this direction. All right, so near the end here, Max, I'll be very brief here. This is one that I think has gotten less traction than the other changes. Um, we already seen some acquisition vehicles, PACs, First Source have been unceremoniously executed, probably for the best, if I'm honest about it. I've never been a big fan of these prolific number of redundant, Department of Redundancy, agency IDIQs. Just don't like it. It's wasteful. They take 2 years to get through protests. then they don't do anything in the first place. It's just it also just sucks BMP out of companies for often no reason. So what's the point? Uh, it, this I think will take some time to really manifest in terms of the impact of this executive order. As vehicles get to that natural end of life, then the decision will have to be made of does this vehicle have a value? I think in many cases the answer to the question will be no. We can use Oasis. We can use Astro. We can use Lion. We can use the schedule. We can use something else that's already established, and we can build on that. I think that's what we'll probably see more. I guess the implication, though, for you is okay, if this is the future, I think we can safely assume that this will be the case of a lot of by Felicia moments to vehicles that we've known for many years. What do? Right? So, if you don't have a schedule, probably should get one. Maybe not right now. Start thinking about it, get it smart, get it planned out because they're not as easy as they think you are. And they can create other pitfalls, by the way. But Oasis Plus, another on ramps and other vehicles, you need to start to think about the on ramp. I would look very carefully at what the agency is doing right now. There's a momentum for a GWAC that they tend to embrace. That would go that way. Just my own thought. But certainly, I think this is probably a good thing. It just won't, it's not going to happen right away, but it should factor into your long-term planning. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. We'll do some Q&A for the minutes we have left. I think you better get on board with commercial first. You're going to finish last. There's
Hey
no way
Brian.
around it, guys. With that?
Hey Brian, there's a big question. I thought I would just like read it to
Okay,
you while people read your slide, if that's okay.
sure.
Perfect. I myself came up with like 90 questions during your slides, so this is a good place to start.
Okay,
Would be
90.
it's from Scott King, and his question is, I have some general questions which may be more of your thoughts around what will happen versus fact-based. But don't worry, Scott, because his opinions are oftentimes
I
they
know
happen.
Scott very
So.
well. Scott,
Okay. Question number one, length of contracts. I think they'll get shorter versus the standard 5 years.
interesting.
Number two, the role of the SBA to sign off on the acquisition strategy. Number three, service-based IDIQs versus GWACs and separate contracts. Think more GSA task orders and less service IDIQs and separate IDIQs. Thanks.
Okay, let's try to unpack these. I may forget one you have to remind me here. So let's just I think it's an interesting question, length of contract. That's actually very interesting.
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I like that. I wasn't thinking about that to be honest with you. It very well could. I mean, it could be that you want to have a shorter term relationship with the company so you could reevaluate it more often. Because we all know that those options tend to have kind of a momentum of their own, where once it's really painful to have to recompete a contract midstream. It's almost just it's easier to simply say, just do the option. Let's do the option. It's the easy button. It's too easy to skip it unless you're really awful or something radically changes with the agency itself. It might. I think the impact, though, of shorter contracts it may be a byproduct of more focus on OTAs and CSOs. Think about that, right? So I don't have an advantage for a long-term OTA. I don't need that. Where CSO, I might want to reevaluate a service earlier than wait for 5 years. So I think it very well could have a side effect that you'll have shorter term contracts, which also means you have more churn in your pipeline. You're
Right.
recompeting more often, which could have a very serious BNP effect. So what other question we got? So let's go through those again here.
Did you want me to ask you the rest
Oh,
of it, which was
there you go. Okay, let's see Scott's question. So role of SBA to sign off. I I think that the SBA's weight was more in the 8A program than other parts. I think with the way the FAR is being rewritten, I think the role of the SBA is going to be marginalized. That's my own opinion. With the less of an emphasis on guaranteed set-asides and 8A recompetes, then if I was anything, why do I need you, SBA? I'm going to do what I want to do. Just what your power base just got eroded. Service IDIQs versus GWACs, separate. I, I think I guess I would interpret the service-based IDIQ as more like a CSO, where it's kind of a single award IDIQ for a service, a more of a commercial offering. I don't know that it's going to affect GWACs necessarily. I think that it would affect the agency IDIQs that have professional services to them. I think
Right?
those are going to probably
He said
go,
R
they'll be less in
RS3,
favor.
yeah, RS3, ITES 3S, right? Because they were trying to recompete that into
Yeah,
MAPS.
the maps thing. Yeah. Well, maps is on pause last time I checked.
Yeah,
I think
it
once
is.
that's the regime, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be on pause and might just be taken out back behind the woodshed and put a bullet in it. Why they need it? I don't see the point.
Well, I think it was more because I mean, okay, let's see what other questions people have
Sure.
here. Let's see. So Jim asks, would there be an element where the company develops a X as a service product? Do you
Right.
think the government will move away from contracting altogether, treating, you know, X XAAS as a go like going to Costco? That's an interesting concept, actually.
Yeah,
Like cutting
yeah.
out the middleman, cutting out the, the Carasofts of the world, procuring directly, you know.
I think well, I think it's good to see you again, Jim. Been a while, so good to see some familiar names here. I, I think that as a service, if I don't want to get fixated on the CSO thing, but step though is important. If the government is really interested in doing commercial-based contracting, if they're truly not just talking a big game, they really mean it, then to develop an as-a-service type of service offering is going to be more open, where you can decide how you deliver a service. They buy into your service. I don't know if we move away from it's just a different type of contract. It's a contract where it's not staff augmentation. It's a contract that's structured in a way that gives you room to maneuver as the company delivering the service. Listen, here's what I'm paying. Think about that flight school next example I gave you. That's a perfect example. Is listen, I don't care how you get things done. I want my helicopters to fly with the Army aviators learning how to fly. I want to make sure they fly without getting themselves killed. I want to make sure when I pick them up after X number of weeks that they know how to fly. How you do that, how you maintain the aircraft, how you get instructors to them, how you train those instructors, I don't care. I want to learn how to fly. How you figure that out is your problem. That's where I think we should go. But the problem is I think the governments have to be willing to let go. They have to say, I'm Elsa, let it go, and just accept how the company does things and get the results they want. Let's
Right.
see. Other questions here.
So does it relate to a full CO because
Okay.
it's an ongoing need, not a widget purchase?
So does it relate to a full COCO? So contractor operated, contractor owned, or contractor owned, contractor operated, because I, I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest with you. I think if you have a service offering, then yeah, it could be a full COCO. That's always the talk I hear from government agencies. We want COCO, but they don't actually do it. I don't know if I'm just buying a thing, just buying a thing. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question though. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Brian. No
That's all
worries.
right.
All right,
Okay.
I think those are all the questions that we had. It is 12:58. Brian, did you have any like two minutes for last thoughts? Like,
Um, I, I think just final thoughts here. I just want to people to think about is we live in I think we already settled we live it's an interesting time we live in. And those interesting times are going to continue to get more interesting. So to embrace it, I'll ball the name about the phrase when I remember the military, embrace the suck, right? To embrace the chaos and just deal with it and make the most out of it. This could be an opportunity. This could be an opportunity for many businesses to be clever and creative and offer what they've always dreamed of doing,
right.
but they were always shackled by traditional contracting.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
shackles may be being loosened or thrown off entirely.
Right.
So I would say to think about what need you serve and you see in the market and come up with that as a service commercial type of offering. But to don't get worked up over vehicles like Shield and wait for the phone to ring.
Right.
If you're not figuring out what that path is and what is you're trying to scratch, you are failing. Don't fail. we have enough intelligence out there to make these decisions. So please be smart, do that research, and then come up with your plan and execute. Because all this chaos might again be a good thing, but we'll see how it plays out next year.
Right. Two things. One, chaos is a ladder.
That's right.
Like Game of Thrones always
There you
said,
go,
chaos is a
Littlefinger.
ladder. And the second thing is stop doing BD and capture, start doing go to market. All
There you
right,
go.
Brian. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Thanks, everyone.